Ever feel like you're, chained to your own business? Like it absolutely can't function without you there every second?
Yeah.
Trust me, you're not alone.
Mm.
Today we're diving into Ryan Deiss's Get Scalable and figuring out how to break free from that feeling. Deiss knows his stuff. He's a serial entrepreneur who almost lost it all with his first company because he was the operating system.
It's the classic founder's trap, isn't it?
Yeah,
You become so valuable to your business that the business itself actually becomes less valuable.
right.
Who wants to buy or invest in a company that can't run without its founder?
Exactly. Deiss calls this the founder's curse and argues we need to upgrade our UOS, that's you running everything in your head, to a scalable OS. We're going to unpack 6 tools he lays out, but before we get all excited about solutions, I think it's really interesting how Deiss starts by debunking some common myths about scaling.
Those myths are so deeply ingrained in the entrepreneurial world, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's like we tell ourselves these stories to justify the crazy hours and the constant pressure.
Okay, hit me with myth number 1. What's the first thing Deiss wants to set straight?
That growth automatically means profit.
Hmm.
So many entrepreneurs are obsessed with revenue, but Deiss makes this really interesting point. Early growth can actually eat your profits.
Oh.
Your hiring, your marketing, building infrastructure, it's all an investment that doesn't always translate into immediate profit.
So chasing those vanity metrics can actually hurt you in the long run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it really connects back to the founder's curse, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you're the one taking on all the new tasks as the company grows, you're just spreading yourself thinner and thinner. It's a recipe for burnout, not profit.
All right, so what's myth number 2?
The classic, I just need to work harder. I'm sure we've all been
Oh,
there.
absolutely. You feel like if you could just push a little harder, stay up a little later, everything would fall into place.
And while hard work is essential, Deiss makes a really important distinction. At some point, it's about working smarter, not harder.
Hmm.
There's a limit to how much you as an individual can do, even if you never sleep.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we break through that individual capacity ceiling?
That's where the Scalable OS comes in. It's about building systems and processes that can handle the workload as your company grows, instead of trying to shoulder everything yourself.
All right, myth number 3. What's the next big misconception?
This one's a doozy. I'll just hire a COO and everything will be fine.
Right.
It's the magical thinking of finding that perfect person who can step in and take over.
I'll admit I've definitely fantasized about that superhero COO who swoops in and solves all my problems.
It's tempting, isn't it? But Deiss argues it's a dangerous myth. Even the best COO can only be as effective as the systems they're given to work with. It's not about finding someone to be the operating system. It's about building the system so they can thrive.
So step 1 isn't hiring. It's clarifying and documenting those systems first. Okay, myth number 4.
I just want a lifestyle business. Sounds nice, doesn't it?
Totally. Who doesn't want more freedom and flexibility? What's Deiss's problem with that?
It's not the desire for freedom that's the issue. It's the illusion that you can have a business that requires zero work. Even a lifestyle business needs to serve its customers, create value, and that takes effort.
So it's not about avoiding work altogether. It's about building a business that doesn't rely solely on your labor.
Precisely. And Deiss argues that a true lifestyle business actually relies on building a scalable OS. You free yourself from those day-to-day tasks that tie you down, and you can focus on the things you truly enjoy.
Okay, last but not least, what's the final myth about scaling?
It's one I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to. Systems and processes are just boring checklists. They seem rigid and stifle creativity, right?
Totally. That's always been my resistance to putting systems in place. But how does Deiss reframe that?
He argues that systems are so much more than checklists. They're the DNA of your business. They define how value is created, how work gets done, how decisions are made.
So it's not about creating a rigid set of rules, but about building a framework that empowers your team to operate efficiently and effectively.
Exactly. It's about creating clarity, not constraint.
This has been really insightful, even just debunking these common myths.
What's interesting to me is how these myths all tie back to the same idea.
Yeah.
The entrepreneur as the hero, the essential, indispensable piece of the puzzle. It's incredibly unsustainable.
Totally. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, get stuck in that mindset. Okay, so we've busted some myths. What's the first tool Deiss recommends for actually building that scalable OS?
He calls them value engines, and they're all about getting crystal clear on how your business actually creates value. You'd be surprised how many entrepreneurs can't answer that question.
I think that's where I struggle the most. I know what I do, but explaining the steps of how I create value for customers, that's a lot harder.
That lack of clarity is a major bottleneck. Without understanding your value creation process, you can't delegate effectively. You can't optimize, and you definitely can't build systems that can run without you.
Okay, so value engines are the solution. But Deiss isn't a fan of just documenting every tiny task, right?
He's very anti-checklist. He says that trying to document every single step will just overwhelm you. Instead, he suggests focusing on the core processes, the value engines that drive your business.
All right, that makes sense. But how do we actually map out these value engines? What does that look like in practice?
He uses a really simple but effective visual approach. You start with your best-selling product or service and think about the triggering event, what kicks off the entire process.
So for something I sell online, it might be a customer clicking on an ad or visiting my website?
Exactly. And then you map out each step, asking, then what happens? Until you get to the end goal, the customer receiving value from your product or service. Deiss is a big fan of using sticky notes on a whiteboard to make it a collaborative visual exercise.
That sounds almost too simple. What's the benefit of actually going through that process?
Deiss tells this great anecdote about how his team used this method and discovered a $200,000 per year mistake. They thought they were done when a customer purchased a course and got their login info, but
Hang on, $200,000 mistake. Our listeners are going to want to hear about this. What happened?
right, so they were mapping out the process for their online courses and realized they had stopped sending personalized follow-up emails after the sale. No one was checking in to make sure customers actually access the course and were having a good experience.
So people were buying, not engaging, and then asking for refunds or just dropping off completely.
Exactly. And they were missing out on upsell opportunities too. Just by adding that follow-up step back in, they were able to recoup a significant amount of revenue. It really highlights how powerful it can be to simply visualize your entire value creation process.
That's a pretty compelling argument for sticky notes. Okay, so we've mapped out our value engines. What's next on the road to building the scalable OS?
Now that we've got those value engines humming, it's time to talk about the next tool, business playbooks. They're the key to making sure each step of your value engine runs smoothly, even without you there to oversee it.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. If the value engines are the roadmap, the playbooks are the detailed directions for each stage of the journey.
That's a great way to put it. Deiss even compares them to the secret recipe for Coca-Cola, locked away in a vault, carefully guarded. Your playbooks are the secret sauce of your business.
That makes sense. It's not just about documenting every single task. It's about identifying those critical steps, the ones that could make or break the entire process.
Exactly. He calls these power stages and suggests focusing your documentation efforts on these first. And what's really interesting is how he frames playbooks as a way to combat these 3 trust breakers that plague so many businesses.
Trust breakers. Okay, I'm all ears. What's the first one?
It's the one we all know and dread. The dreaded shoulder tap. You know when your employees are constantly interrupting you with questions needing your approval for every little thing?
Oh, tell me about it. I feel like I can't get anything done because I'm constantly being pulled in a million directions. Is that really what Deiss means by a trust breaker, though?
He is. Because think about it.
Yeah.
Why are your employees shoulder tapping? It's not because they're lazy or incompetent. It's because they lack the confidence to make decisions on their own. They're looking to you for all the answers, and that's a recipe for burnout for everyone involved.
Wow, I've never thought about it that way. But it makes sense, right? If they don't have clear instructions, they're going to hesitate and second-guess themselves.
Exactly. And that's where playbooks come in. By giving your employees clear step-by-step instructions, you empower them to make decisions independently. You build their confidence and free yourself from being the bottleneck.
So playbooks aren't just about efficiency, they're about empowering your team. I like that. What's the second trust breaker?
Oops, my bad. Those mistakes that happen when good people are simply missing information or haven't been properly trained.
We all make mistakes, but in a business, those mistakes can cost time and money.
Exactly. And again, Deiss argues that playbooks can help. By clearly documenting the correct way to perform a task, you reduce the likelihood of errors. And when mistakes do happen, the playbook can turn it into a learning opportunity.
Instead of getting frustrated and blaming people, you can use that oops moment to refine the playbook and make sure it doesn't happen again. So what's the third trust breaker?
This one's a biggie, the black box. It's when you have processes that only one person knows how to do. It's like having a single point of failure in your entire system.
Talk about risky. What happens if that person wins the lottery and decides to sail off into the sunset?
Or even just takes a vacation. Deiss shares a story about how one of his companies almost shut down because a key employee who held all the knowledge for a critical process went on an extended trip without documenting anything.
Oh my gosh, that's a nightmare scenario. It really highlights why having these documented processes is so important. So we've talked about why we need playbooks. How do we actually go about creating them?
Deiss has a really clear three-stage process: define, design, deploy.
Okay, let's break that down. What does the define stage involve?
First, you've got to identify those power stages within your value engines. Remember, these are the critical tasks that, if done incorrectly, could derail the whole process.
So going back to our online course example, a power stage might be setting up the payment processing system or maybe writing the sales page copy.
Exactly. And then you give that power stage a clear, memorable name. It might seem like a small thing, but Deiss emphasizes the importance of naming. It signals ownership and makes the playbook feel more tangible.
So instead of payment processing setup, it might be something more engaging like the revenue stream gateway.
Love it. You want your playbooks to feel important, not just like a dry technical manual.
All right, so we've defined our power stage and given it a catchy name. What's next in the design phase?
This is where you actually create the playbook document. And Deiss has a great method. Do document, do again.
What does that mean exactly?
It means having the person most familiar with the task perform it while documenting every single step. Then they repeat the task, but this time they follow their own instructions blindly, like someone else is using them.
That's so smart. It's like a built-in test to make sure the instructions are clear and complete.
Exactly. And if they run into any snags, they can refine the playbook accordingly. Deiss even suggests having someone completely new to the process test it out to ensure it's truly foolproof.
I love how practical and user-friendly this is. Okay, so we've defined our power stage, created our playbook, tested it thoroughly. What happens in the deploy stage?
This is all about making the playbook accessible to the team, training everyone on how to use it, and establishing accountability for ensuring it's actually followed.
Deiss is a big advocate for keeping playbooks digital, right?
Absolutely. No dusty old binders allowed. He argues that in today's fast-paced world, playbooks need to be easily accessible and updatable. A shared online platform is ideal.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the accountability piece? How do we make sure these playbooks aren't just sitting there gathering virtual dust?
Deiss recommends a really simple but powerful question. Do we have a playbook for this?
So whenever there's a question or a problem, the first step is to check if there's already a documented process that addresses it.
Exactly. And if there is, the next question is, was it followed? This helps determine whether the issue was a lack of documentation or a failure to follow instructions.
I can see how that would create a culture of accountability and continuous improvement. What if there isn't a playbook?
That's an opportunity to create one. Deiss is a big believer in turning mistakes into learning experiences. By documenting what went wrong, you can create a playbook to prevent it from happening again.
So it's not about punishing mistakes, it's about turning them into valuable insights for the business. Okay, we've talked about value engines, we've talked about business playbooks. What's the next tool in Deiss's Scalable OS arsenal?
This one's all about your people, building high-output teams. And Deiss starts by addressing a problem I think we've all encountered at some point, the dreaded, "that's not my job" syndrome.
Ooh, I know that feeling all too well. You ask someone to do something and they immediately push back, saying it's not their responsibility. It's like pulling teeth.
It's incredibly frustrating, isn't it? And it totally undermines your efforts to create a smooth, efficient system.
It does. But what's Deiss's solution for overcoming this? Because sometimes it feels like you're dealing with a team of rebellious teenagers.
He has a really interesting take on it. He argues that a lot of the time it's not actually about laziness or defiance. It's about a lack of clarity.
You mean they're not intentional trying to drive me crazy?
Well, maybe, sometimes. But seriously, Deiss makes a good point. If your employees aren't clear on what they're supposed to be doing, they're going to be hesitant to take ownership.
They're not being difficult, they're just confused. So how do we fix that?
Deiss introduces a tool called the High Output Team Canvas. It's all about assigning what he calls critical accountability bullets, or CAs.
CAs, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Think of CAs as a super focused list of the 3-5 most important responsibilities for each member of your team. Deiss stresses that this is not the same as a job description.
Because job descriptions are often super vague and out of date?
Exactly. CAVs are about defining the essential tasks that truly drive value for the business right now. And here's where it gets really cool. He suggests deriving CAVs directly from your value engines.
Oh, wow. So you go through each step of the value engine and ask, who is responsible for this? It's like connecting the dots between the high-level process and the individual roles.
That's a great way to put it. And the benefits are huge. You eliminate confusion, surface hidden problems, identify people who are overburdened, and those who are underutilized. Deiss even gives an example of how this process revealed a completely unnecessary 2-hour meeting that was just wasting everyone's time.
That's amazing. It's all about finding those hidden inefficiencies and optimizing your team's effort. So we've assigned our CABs what's next.
Deiss emphasizes the importance of regularly reviewing and refining those CABs. Your business is constantly evolving, so you need to make sure that everyone's roles and responsibilities are still aligned with your current goals.
I'm loving all of this. Okay, what's the next tool in our Scalable OS toolbox?
Deiss calls it company scorecards, and it's all about using data to drive decisions. He uses this great analogy of an entrepreneur being like a pilot. You can't just fly by gut feeling. You need instruments to guide you, especially when things get turbulent.
That's such a powerful image. You need that objective data to help you stay on course. But what kind of data are we talking about here?
Deiss advocates for weekly scorecards. He says they strike the right balance between the daily chaos and the infrequent course correction of annual planning.
Weekly? Wow, that seems like a lot to keep up with.
It can be, but Deiss argues that the true value of scorecards isn't in just collecting data, it's in the insights they provide. He suggests tracking both evergreen metrics, those core numbers that are always relevant, like revenue and profit margins, and North Star metrics, which change each quarter based on your specific strategic goals.
Okay, so it's not about tracking everything. It's about focusing on the metrics that actually matter for your current stage of growth.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that Deiss uses a color coding system to quickly assess the health of each metric. Green means on track. Yellow means you're a little behind. And red, of course, means trouble.
I love that. It's so visual and easy to understand. You can just glance at the scorecard and immediately get a sense of what needs attention.
He also shares this brilliant question to help you choose the right metrics. Imagine you're on a beach vacation and have the opportunity to extend your trip for half price. Which metrics would you absolutely need to see to make that decision?
That's so good. It really forces you to cut through the noise and focus on what's truly essential.
Now, here's something that might surprise you. Deiss is adamant that scorecards should be a manual process. No fancy software or automation.
Really? Why is that?
He believes that physically entering the data forces you to engage with it more deeply. You're more likely to spot trends and anomalies that you might miss if you're just looking at a computer-generated report.
Wow, that's interesting. It goes against our instinct to automate everything, but I can see how it could lead to a more intimate understanding of your business.
All right, ready for tool number 5? This one's all about communication. The scalable meeting rhythm.
Okay, I'm all for streamlining meetings. I feel like I spend half my life in them.
Deiss quotes Ben Horowitz, who says that communication is the CEO's #1 job, even above strategy. And I think that's really profound. If you can't communicate effectively, even the best strategies will fall flat.
It's true. And Deiss is pretty ruthless in his diagnosis of bad meeting culture. He asks, do you have tons of recurring meetings with vague purposes?
Ouch, that hits a little too close to home.
Tell me about it. We've all been in those meetings that feel like a complete waste of time.
Deiss's solution is what he calls the scalable planning system. It involves planning in 3-year cycles, executing in 90-day sprints, and using weekly scorecard reviews to monitor progress.
So it's about having a clear rhythm for both planning and execution with regular check-ins to ensure everyone is aligned.
Exactly. And he breaks down the different types of meetings you should be having. Quarterly sprint planning, monthly business reviews, all-hands meetings, and those weekly scorecard reviews we talked about earlier. Each meeting has a clear purpose and agenda, no more aimless checking-in sessions.
Okay, this is all starting to feel like a really cohesive system. I can see how each piece builds on the previous one. What's the final tool in this Scalable OS framework?
It's the Clarity Compass, and it's all about creating a framework for decision-making that allows others to think like you.
That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To build a business that can make smart decisions even when you're not in the room.
Exactly. And Deiss identifies 4 key decision cases to consider. The business case, is it profitable? The customer case, does it benefit our customers? The culture case, does it align with our values? And the capability case, do we have the skills and resources to do it well?
Okay, so before making any decision, you're running it through this filter. business customer culture capability.
Precisely. And the Clarity Compass is a visual tool that helps you do just that. It consists of 4 elements: your 3-year target, your company purpose, your core values, and your strategic anchors.
Strategic anchors. I'm not familiar with that term.
Think of them as your company's unique strengths, those mutant superpowers that give you a competitive advantage. By clearly defining your strategic anchors, you can make better decisions about which opportunities to pursue and which ones to pass on.
It's about focusing your energy on what you do best, not trying to be all things to all people. I like that.
Deiss recommends holding a dedicated Clarity Day with your leadership team to really hammer out your Clarity Compass and make sure everyone is on the same page.
That makes sense. It's like a high-level strategic planning session to get everyone aligned on the big picture. And then once you have your Clarity Compass in place, it becomes the guiding document for all future decisions.
Exactly. It's a shared framework that empowers everyone to make choices that are in the best interests of the business, even if you're not there to personally weigh in.
This has been an incredible overview of Deiss's Scalable OS framework. I'm feeling inspired. Before we wrap up, what's the biggest takeaway for you from all of this?
I think what fascinates me most is how Deiss shifts the focus from the entrepreneur as the hero to the system as the hero. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about creating a system that allows everyone to make smart decisions.
That's such a powerful reframing. It's not UOS anymore, it's Scalable OS.
And what I love about Deiss's approach is that it's not just theoretical. He provides these concrete tools and frameworks that you can start implementing today.
Yes. It's not just about dreaming of building a business that can run without you. It's about having an actual roadmap to get there.
Now remember, building a scalable OS isn't a one-time event. It's a continuous process of refining and adapting your systems as your business grows and changes.
It's like a living, breathing organism.
But the payoff is huge. By investing in these systems, you create a business that's more valuable, more resilient, and ultimately more fulfilling for you as the founder.
So what final thought would you leave our listeners with today?
Deiss has this great quote that I think sums it up perfectly. Having the right answers got you to today, but asking the right questions will get you to the future.
I love that. It's a call to action for all of us to step back and think about the systems we have in place and the ones we need to create.
And I think that's a great point. We've been talking about all these tools and frameworks, and it can feel a little overwhelming, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, where do we even begin? We've got value engines, playbooks, scorecards, meeting rhythms, the Clarity Compass. It's a lot to take in.
It is. But Deiss actually provides a really clear roadmap for installing this scalable OS.
Okay, tell me more about that. What's step 1?
He suggests starting with a dedicated Clarity Day with your leadership team. It's basically a focused strategic planning session where you really hammer out your Clarity Compass.
We talked about that earlier. It's about defining your 3-year target, your company purpose, your core values, and your strategic anchors.
Exactly. You want to make sure that everyone is crystal clear on those 4 elements because they become the foundation for every decision you make as a company.
Makes sense. So you get that alignment on your Clarity Compass. What's next?
Then you bring the rest of the team in for your quarterly sprint planning meeting and start putting the OS into action.
So you're taking those high-level principles from the Clarity Compass and translating them into concrete goals and action plans for the next 90 days.
Exactly. And this is where you really start to see the magic happen. As you map out your value engines, create your playbooks, assign your CANIT, critical accountability bullets, establish your meeting rhythm, and start tracking your progress with scorecards, you'll see how each piece of the system reinforces the others.
It's like building a well-oiled machine.
It is. And here's the thing. Even though we've laid out this framework in a linear way, it's not necessarily a linear process. You might find that you need to go back and revisit certain elements as you go.
Right. It's an iterative process, not a one-and-done kind of thing.
Exactly. The key is to just start somewhere and keep iterating until you find what works for you and your business.
I love that. It takes the pressure off, right? It's not about getting it perfect from day one. It's about continuous improvement.
That's what Deiss emphasizes throughout the book. Building a scalable OS is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
So true. And I think that's really encouraging for entrepreneurs. It's not about having all the answers up front. It's about being willing to learn and adapt as you go.
Exactly. And the payoff is huge. You get to create a business that's more valuable, more resilient, and more fulfilling for everyone involved.
It sounds like installing this scalable OS is quite an achievement.
It is. It's a sign that you're moving from being the bottleneck to building a system for growth. And Deiss says, having the right answers got you to today, but asking the right questions will get you to the future.
I love that quote. It's a reminder that the real power of this framework lies in its ability to help you ask the right questions. So, to our listeners, I'd say take some time to reflect on those questions. What are the systems you need to put in place to create a business that can thrive without you having to be the hero every single day?
This has been such a fascinating deep dive, and we've only just scratched the surface of Deiss's book. I highly recommend checking out Get Scalable for a more in-depth look at these concepts.
And remember, it's not about blindly copying someone else's system. It's about taking these principles and adapting them to your own unique business and circumstances.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll be back next time with another insightful exploration of the ideas shaping the world of entrepreneurship.